You guys wanted energy? You got it, baby. The dynamic fantasy duo is whole once again. We're back in the lab on the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, your daily source for fantasy news, betting breakdowns, and everything you need to build that winner, including on today's episode, teams to target in the second half for fantasy gold set to explode. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Salute, much love, and thank you so much to everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden, on this side of the microphone. It's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. I can't wait to get to today's episode, Steele, because look, it's crunch time, my friend. And if you're lurking around a top spot, you're lurking around a playoff spot, this is about to be a very critical couple of weeks. So before we get to big time bets at the end of every episode, like we like to do, loaded set of games on tonight's board, Steele. I believe we're looking at 11 games. Excited to talk to you about bets once again. This is a good angle to cover here. What teams have maybe been lurking in the weeds, or what teams are we looking at to potentially break out? And there is a lot of good value in players to be had. I got 3 teams I want to talk about. You have 3. Welcome back, my friend, first and foremost. Good to have you back in the booth. And over to you for who are you looking at for some big second half teams to target for fantasy gold.
Well, first of all, shout out to you, man. You are an absolute dog going solo with me gone for a week. So holding down the fort. Shout out to the channel manager as well, Sean, for
big shout out to Sean.
The back end. Really appreciate it. I was, very happy to get a week-long vacation, but I'm just
how's the liver doing, by the way?
Liver, it's holding strong. It's a little damaged, but it's still working. A little sunburnt, but don't worry, the aloe's been put on, and we're back in action.
Perfect time to return to the ice then. Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. Back in this freezing cold temperature we got going in Toronto, minus 20 weather. It's unbelievable, complete different from where I was in Dominican Republic. But I'm happy to be back talking hockey with my boy over here. Super excited for this episode. And the first team I want to talk about, probably the hottest team in the National Hockey League right now, is the Montreal Canadiens. When you look at what they've done, development with their young players, acquiring young players, some veterans along the way, and you look at the stages over the last 3 to 4 years at where they have, or where they were in the standings at the end of December or mid-January, being dead last in the Eastern Conference 3 years ago, second last 2 seasons ago, now holding on to a wild card spot and feeling themselves. It is quite impressive. And obviously, like you've said, high on Cole Caufield, 30 potential 40-plus goal scorer. He's got 24 on the season with 40 points. Captain Nick Suzuki feeling it as well. Lane Hudson might be the favorite for the Calder Trophy at this point. He has been popping off offensively, holding that with 39 points. Patrick Laine in the lineup has been great too. Really, where I want to talk about this is Jacob Dobish. He has been fantastic for this team. I mean, just coming into the league, looking at where he's drafted, 5th round, 136th overall back in the 2020 draft. And he's getting his time in the spotlight right now. 5 starts, 5 wins, and in impressive fashion against some very top-tier teams. Florida on the road, Colorado on the road, Washington on the road, Dallas on the road, and the New York Rangers, all 5 wins, holding down, let's see this, a .941 save percentage and a 1.55 goals against average. He has been lights out for them. I still love Sam Montembeault. I still think he holds a lot of value for Montreal as well, but I really think there should be consideration about who the number 1 goaltender should be moving forward for the second half of the season. So this Montreal Canadiens team, there's a lot of young guys that you could really talk about. I think you actually mentioned maybe last week, a few episodes ago, Jake Evans really impressive in that bottom 6 group. He's got 11 goals, 25 points. The peripherals are pretty decent. Still a young guy who we haven't seen at the National Hockey League level because of contract issues in Russia and everything. But Ivan Demidov as well has been quite impressive with what he's been doing on the national. Is somebody obviously a lot of people are waiting for to see in the National Hockey League. So this Montreal Canadiens team, I think if they can keep buzzing like this, they can get some strong goaltending from Dobish and Montembeault, and then obviously those young guys continuing to do what they do in the offensive zone, there is a very good possibility they finish with a second or first wildcard spot.
It's very interesting that you bring up the Montreal Canadiens, especially the teams that they've beat, because I want to run to the rafters and start shouting that this team isn't for real. But when you look at the wins that you've just mentioned and some of the others as well, just in January, shootout win against the Avs, gutsy OT win against the Canucks and the Capitals. Then they lose in a shootout to the Dallas Stars to then come back, beat the Stars, beat the Rangers, and the Tampa Bay Lightning. You got the blip on the radar there, a very big emotional game against a rival in the Toronto Maple Leafs who are also feeling themselves right now. I don't hold that one against Montreal whatsoever, except for a couple of poor judgment situations from a few different players. This is a young team. It's going to happen. But there is also some burgeoning fantasy value to be had with this squad. And I love that you're mentioning it. When a team is hot and we're headed into the second half and they're beating good squads, pay attention, get a piece any way that you can. And I think that is probably the main takeaway for every team that we talk about here. Not all of their top pieces are going to be there, but if they're rolling and their schedule is okay, because that's why I want to talk about the Nashville Predators as my first team that I'm looking at in the second half steal. The Nashville Predators have the easiest schedule for the rest of the season. Take this in: 2 games against the Sharks, Blackhawks, Sabres, 3 against the Ducks, 2 against the Kraken, and 2 against the New York Islanders. Yeah, of course, there's some good teams mixed in there too. I'm highlighting the bad ones. But right there at the top of the list for me is the Nashville Predators. By the by, Montreal, right there, 7th easiest schedule. So I like this for our second half targets for teams set to plunder for some fantasy value. Let me hit you with my take on the Nashville Predators. Everybody coming into this season was excited for the moves. How could you not be? It's been discussed ad nauseum. We don't need to get into that. But what we do need to get into is they struggled mightily to generate offensive chances in the first few weeks of the season, all the way up until right before Christmas. But now, Steele, and I know a 7-piece against the Sharks doesn't exactly jump off the page. Maybe it should. You were mentioning the biggest come-from-behind victory in the history of the Nashville Predators the other night against a pretty good San Jose Sharks team. And I'm going to talk about the Nashville Predators when it comes to bets, by the way. But I think there's a lot of value to be had here because of how bad they started as well. Take this in, Steele. 20 goals scored over their last 4 games. I want a piece of Nashville real bad. The offense is starting to click. Stammer's on that top line. I think there's lots of value to go around. The Tommy Novaks of the world, some of those under-the-rated guys at the start of the season, starting to do their thing. I don't know what you think, but I think now it's just taken a very long time. This team is far too good, far too balanced, and has far too much veteran studs for me to think that they aren't going to turn it on heavy in the second half. Are they too far behind the 8 ball to really catch a playoff spot? I'll turn it over to you, but I really, really do like the Nashville Predators here, poised for a big second half.
Look, you know that the Nashville Predators are always a dark horse team for me at the beginning of the season. I mentioned it in September. I mentioned it in October. They continued to let me down, the first half of this year. And it's great to see them winning games. 4-game win streak, 6-4-0 in their last 10. Yeah. A lot better offensively and slightly better in their own defensive zone. I still think they can get some better goaltending.
Agreed.
Obviously, not one of the strongest defensive cores in the National Hockey League anymore. It's really only just Roman Josi at this point. You've got Luke Schenn. You bring in Justin Barron, who's kind of chipped in his first 3 games with them. Yeah. There's a lot of missing pieces with this team, and I really do think with the draft capital they have, the draft picks that they have loaded up on over the last couple of years, they can use that to their advantage. They can still move some pieces. I know Gustav Nyquist's name has been out there as a trade asset before the trade deadline. So there's, 10 points back behind the second wild card team in the Calgary Flames. Yeah, I don't want to say they're quite out of it, but they really need to step it on. So I like the fact that you're mentioning them. I'm going to say that they fall back just because of a team I want to talk about, or 2 teams I actually want to talk about from this Western Conference. But the Nashville Predators, if they can continue this offensive strong mindset that they've got going in the last 4, there's a possibility they end up in the playoffs.
I like it, Steele. I just think, you know what? I agree with you about the playoff angle. I definitely agree with you about them maybe even hovering around and just missing out. I just still think with what I'm seeing offensively now they're really starting to cook. So I think you can get yourself a piece, peripheral or otherwise, for some offensive value. Let's talk about it. 2 Western Conference teams for Steele. I'm headed out east for 2 Eastern Conference teams. We'll keep it tight. We try and get you guys in and out in 30 minutes with everything that you need to know, including bets at the end of every single episode. Let's talk about it, though, because today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers that bet $5 get $300 in bonus bets if that first bet hits. That's $300, Steele, to keep the action rolling. You know how we feel at FanDuel about this podcast. FanDuel, easy to navigate. The variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Can't wait to make my bets tonight, Steele. When you get paid instantly with FanDuel, there's no waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add a little extra excitement into the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered for the NFL. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started with that $300 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season more with the NFL on FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We really do appreciate all that love and support. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. We can't wait to hit the goal of ours. So continue to share with your friends and family out there. It really does mean the world to us. That's why we do what we do. We try to return that favor with the insight, with the hockey, fantasy hockey analysis, as well, big-time bets at the end of every single episode. Put a little extra money in those pockets of yours. Flip. Western Conference for me, this one is actually going to be very tight. You know, not as tight as the Eastern Conference, of course, but there's a few teams that I really like and have the potential of making it. And I want to start with the Utah Hockey Club. By the way, I don't know if you saw that, but it seems like Utah will not be named the Yeti because they couldn't get that trademark. I don't know if you saw that. But Utah Hockey Club remains. They're going to have to figure something out.
That's rattling.
It is rattling because I like the Yeti as well. However, that's where I'm going with this. I really like this Utah Hockey Club team right now. And there's a few injuries. Obviously, Sergachev day-to-day, Dylan Guenther, who's been out for a little bit as well, or for the last 5 to 6 games, which has hurt them offensively. And I think that's something they're missing right now is a real talented goal scorer. You look down, up and down their roster. Clayton Keller's popping off. Logan Cooley's been phenomenal. Nick Schmaltz. They don't have a guy who has 20 or 30 goals on the season yet. And that's something they've missed over the last couple of years with this franchise and their organization. Regardless of that, they're still playing some really good hockey. And the fact that they're only 4 points back of the Calgary Flames for that last wild card spot. They've won their last 2. They're 4-5-1 in the last 10. The one player I'm really impressed with, and I think at the beginning of the season, I mentioned about fading him because I didn't like his peripheral stats. I didn't think it transferred well into his offensive game, but he's proved me wrong. The shoe's in my mouth. I'm never talking smack about Logan Cooley again because he has been a fantastic offensive player for this team right now, using his speed, his edge work, his heads up the entire way. He's shooting the puck a lot more. I still want him to shoot more than he has, but the fact that he's doing it now at this level and becoming a talented player, probably the second best player on the team right behind Clayton Keller right now, is amazing to me. So a guy that I faded, I was wrong about him. I needed to fix that statement real quickly. Another guy who I think that has some interesting fantasy value I've mentioned before is Michael Kesselring. 18 points from him on the blue line. The peripherals stand out a little bit. 87 shots, 54 hits, and 39 blocks as well. Ian Cole, the veteran leadership that he brings. Again, still waiting for from some guys like Michelli and Barrett Hayton to really kind of be consistent with this team in the lineup. But other than that, I think hands down, they got a really good shot at making the playoffs if they can continue rolling like this. Again, like I said, 4 points back of the Calgary Flames.
Andre Tourigny deserves a lot of credit behind the bench in Utah because this team is actually playing very responsible hockey for the most part, considering, and you're kind of alluding to it in your points here, how young they are. And they have been banged up as well. All over the ice, actually banged up, almost seemingly at every single position they have had something to deal with. much love for mentioning Logan Cooley. He is a player that I think we've been waiting to really pop, and there's been flashes of it. And I still think he's just, I like to say this, scratching the surface of his fantasy value. Very intriguing team. I didn't think you would mention this club, but I love that you have. And I think I perhaps maybe overlooked how they have been playing, especially, the last couple of games, it's 2 wins, but 2 wins, 47 points, lurking around in that wild card race. When there is this many good young players, you're going to have exactly the case of what you just mentioned. Streaks of really good play, like they started the season shooting the doors off of teams, and then they're going to have their struggles, growing pains. I like to say that one as well, Steele. I'll be honest, haven't watched a ton of Utah hockey, but what I have seen is they have some very good pieces to work with here. And once they start to build it out a little bit, head coach, the young guys, this is going to be a team, a force to be reckoned with, regardless of the name on that jersey. By the way, I think we got to talk about this team because this is one that I couldn't do without you in the Ottawa Senators. And look, this might be a tough sell for a number of reasons close to our chest on this podcast, Steele. But let me just lay it out for you like this. 52 points for the Ottawa Senators right now. By far of the season, and in my opinion, from what I've seen from them over the last couple of years, the best stretch of hockey that I've seen. Is it going to last? I'm not sure. Levi Marilainen, looking really good. Linus Ullmark, obviously the guy, he's nearing return. But now this adds a little bit of an insurance blanket that I think we can agree has been one of the major unraveling points for this team over the last, since you and I have been doing this podcast at least for 3 years. By the way, shout out to 3 years once again. This is a situation, though, when I see this team go, in my opinion, this isn't a club that I want in the first round of the playoffs when I look at it, Steele. You've got Brady Tkachuk being an absolute menace. You've got a really, really good power play. You know how I feel about special teams when it comes to April. And this team can be very hard to handle in the offensive zone. It all comes down to the play of this blue line. It all comes down to the play of guys like Jake Sanderson and Thomas Chabot and what happens otherwise. But when I look at what I've seen from them lately, really scoring goals at will when that power play is going, and let me bring that up because I just had it here. The Ottawa Senators currently sit 12th in the NHL. I think they're much better than that on the power play. I think they can be a little bit better at 5-on-5 because they're actually been a pretty good team on the penalty kill, I thought, this season. But maybe I'm butchering that. They can be better on the penalty kill. Thank you. I'm switching that around. 18th in the NHL on the PK. There's been a lot going on, Steele. So here we go. I love the Sens in the second half. I like Shane Pinto. I say go out there and get a piece of him. He's one of the guys that I'm looking at for a big second half. Josh Norris is somehow still out there in a lot of leagues. Go get yourself a piece of Josh Norris. However you can get it, I think the Ottawa Senators, even though that Atlantic division is ever tough, I think they lurk around for a wild card spot, and I think they're going to provide a ton of fantasy value.
Talked about the Montreal Canadiens, just finished talking about the Ottawa Senators. I got another Canadian team I want to talk about coming up after the break. But hey, man, Montreal Canadiens and Ottawa holding on to that first and second wildcard spot. There's quite the possibility they make it in the playoffs for the first time in a while for both franchises. Same can be said for this Calgary Flames team that I want to talk about after the break.
Boom.
But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. If you're like Flip and I and you love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy, then the Game Time is the app for you. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy and excitement was unforgettable. I'm actually thinking about going to see Kygo tomorrow at Scotiabank. I'm checking out Game Time for those last-minute tickets. Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets for an upcoming Maple Leafs game, like I just said, looking for Kygo tickets. And with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You got to love that. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen. We really do appreciate it. Share with your friends and family out there. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button. Love you guys for tuning in every single day, Monday through Friday. Loving these Calgary Flames right now. We're talking about some teams that are poised to break out in the second half of the season. I don't feel like I've talked about the Calgary Flames enough this year, and they've been holding down a wild card spot or a playoff spot since the beginning of the season. And it really comes down to the young netminder they have in the blue paint. Dustin Wolf has been absolutely incredible. 16-7-2 with a .917 save percentage and a 2.50 goals against average.
So true.
When it comes to the fantasy value with this team, there's not a lot of absolute studs or superstars out there, but you can still find, kind of seep through the mess in there and find some value with some of these players. Again, I'm a huge fan of Mackenzie Weegar because of the peripheral stats. You can find a little bit of everything here. If you need some offensive help, Jonathan Huberdeau, 18 goals, 14 assists. Doesn't really provide that much peripheral. Offensively, he's been a stud so far. Nazem Kadri as well. He's probably the one player you can get the most out of right now alongside Mackenzie Weegar. You go down the list, Martin Pospisil, if you're in a banger league.
Blake Coleman.
It's Blake Coleman. Who again, 25 points, has a lot of shots and gets physical aspect. Connor Zary, obviously on the IR, he's out for the season.
Right.
Still a guy that you want to keep an eye on for the future. Matt Coronado's been turning it up a little bit. He's got 11 goals and 24 points on the year. So there's a few guys on this team that you can find the value in. Obviously, you're not gonna, they're not gonna be your go-to players, your best players out there. But again, down to, for me, Dustin Wolf, because when you look at the Flames right now, they are a -12 goal differential on the season. They sit second last in goals for, but top 10 in goals against. So defensively, they're very strong. You got Rasmus Dahlin back there.
Rasmus Anderson.
Rasmus Anderson back there. You got Jake Bean. You got Kevin Ball, Mackenzie Weegar have been really, really good for this team. But then it just comes down to offensively and scoring those goals. So if they can just get a little bit more mindset in the offensive zone, shooting those pucks, going hard to the net, and for the fighting for those rebounds, I really think the Utah Hockey Club and the Calgary Flames, for me, are the two teams that come down to that second wild card spot. Because with what's going on in Vancouver, potentially trading JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, I think they're on the outside. Again, you got the St. Louis Blues, who I really don't feel have it in them to be a wild card team.
Fair.
Again, they could possibly end up there. But for me, those two teams, the Calgary Flames and the Utah Hockey Club.
Yeah, I like your first two. I don't know how I feel about the Calgary Flames. I don't disagree. I'm not saying like you're wrong or this is
with you because again, we haven't. I mean, me personally, I haven't talked about them a lot this year, but they've just been there the entire year. So it's hard to see where they're going to go.
And when you have a goaltender, though, holding you down in the aspect that Dustin Wolf is, then maybe that gives you the freedom to perhaps do some things. Calgary, though, sitting there near the top of the table in terms of tough schedule down the stretch. According to Tankathon, they got the 9th hardest schedule in the NHL down the stretch. And just to throw it out there, the hardest schedule: Red Wings, Islanders, Kraken, Sabres, Columbus Blue Jackets, New York Rangers, and rounded out with the Blackhawks, San Jose Sharks, and then the Flames. So the reason why I had Nashville up there, easiest schedule. The reason why I had the Ottawa Senators up there, 10th easiest, and why I want to round it out with this team is they have the 3rd easiest schedule for the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Tampa Bay Lightning get to play the Sabres thrice, the Red Wings thrice, the Islanders 3 times as well. I'm not going to say thrice that many times. Mix it in with the Penguins and Blackhawks as well. You know how I feel about the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think I've been very clear about this, actually. I love John Cooper behind the bench. The trio of Nikita Kucherov, Victor Hedman, and Andre Vasilevsky in the cage is a good enough trio of any team out there in terms of veteran leadership that can take a team on a run. Then you sprinkle in the top line. You sprinkle in some of these players that have really been good for John Cooper. Brandon Hagel, Cirelli, Nick Paul even. I really like the depth of this forward group in Tampa Bay. You might be able to nitpick a little bit about the blue line perhaps and the depth there, and I won't argue there. But I really like this team, Steele. I like what I've seen from them up until this point of the season, and I got one stat here. This is a club that's sitting 3rd in the Atlantic Division, but with a plus 36 goal differential. That's the 2nd best in the Eastern Conference, behind only the Washington Capitals. So I don't think you've even really seen the absolute best out of this Tampa team. I really like them in the second half. Some of those names I threw out there, even on the bottom end of things, the Nick Pauls of the world, I think there's going to be a lot of value in this team headed down the stretch. Just like there is in these big time bets, baby. I've missed doing bets with you. And if you're okay, I'm going to just pop off very, very quickly to wrap up this episode because I've been taking a long, hard look at this New York Rangers team. And I understand they had that blip on the radar against the Montreal Canadiens where they lost 5-4 the other night. They could have had that one, and that would have been wins in 6 of their last 7 games. I'm not ready to say the team's back, but they're 7-2-1 in their last 10 against Philly. I like what I'm seeing. I like them at home. I know that the Philadelphia Flyers have been playing better. First pick, get it out of the way. Easy, clean. Rangers at home, money line, love it. Second and third pick, including lock of the night, come from the same situation. The Nashville Predators are a team, just like I alluded to before, that you want to get a piece of for fantasy, and you want to get a piece of them right now for betting. They are absolutely rolling, and when I looked at what they've done to the San Jose Sharks deal over the last 4 games, you want to take this one in? They have beat them every single time by 2 or more goals. They have also scored, and yeah, I checked this number, they have scored 25 goals over the last 4 games against the San Jose Sharks, and they have won 10 straight games against the San Jose Sharks. First pick, over 6.5. This one's going to go over the number in a hurry, I think, just like the previous game and just like the previous 4. And then I'm going to take the Preds on the road. I know it's a bit spicy on the puck line. These might be all too good to be true angles. I don't care. I'm going to hammer it. I'm going to keep it simple. Preds money line, Preds puck line, lock of the night. Over to you. Where are you looking?
Well, I'm not going to argue with that. That's definitely getting added into the parlay, maybe a separate parlay on itself, but I love those bets right there. I've got one of them with my first one. Rangers on the money line against the Philadelphia Flyers, minus 152. Again, I'm with you. I'm not going to say they're quite back yet, but they figured out what's happening in the locker room and on the ice and their chemistry. They're 6-1-3 in their last 10 games. Like you said, 7-2-1 against the Flyers in the last 10. Rangers on the money line at minus 152 for my first pick.
Love it.
Second pick, I've got the Canadiens on the money line on the road against the Red Wings at plus 108. If you're going to give me the Canadiens at plus 108 on the road right now with the way they're playing, and especially with the way the Red Wings are playing as of recently, I'm taking it every single day. They've already beat the Red Wings twice this year in a back-to-back situation. I believe it was a 5-4 overtime win in the first game and then a 4-1 or a 5-1 victory in the second game of the back-to-back. Canadiens on the money line for my first pick. Montreal 7-1 in their last 10 games in the National Hockey League. Final pick of the night. Hurricanes on the puck line against the Columbus Blue Jackets.
I like
at
that.
Minus 124. They're 6-1-3 against the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Tough back-to-back for the Jackets, too.
And exactly the reason why I'm going with the Hurricanes on the puck line. It's a back-to-back situation for Columbus. The first game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, which was last night, is going to be a tough situation going from Toronto to Carolina. No matter what ends up happening in Toronto, whether they win or lose, they're going to be tired. They're going to be a little bit flat-footed to start the game. And this Carolina team, they're going to put their foot on the gas to try to catch up with Washington for that top spot right now. They're 8 points back. So if they want to catch them and finish top number 1 in the Metro, they got to start winning these big games, especially in a situation like this. Lock of the night for me. I'm going with the Hurricanes on the puck line. It is my lock of the night. I love the Nashville picks. That over 6.5 is definitely going to sprinkle into the parlay as well as that puck line.
Bang. Look, the Detroit Red Wings, I just want to poke one hole in your argument there. They've been okay of late, but I actually think the Montreal Canadiens have also been hitting for you a ton, and they're playing good hockey. So I can't argue with you too mumuch. I just can't discredit. They're 6-3-1, the Red Wings, in their last 10.
That is fair.
So I just want to throw that out there. I know you've been on a bit of a beach heater, so I just wanted to bring a little bit of clarity to that side of things for you, because we do this together, baby, and I couldn't do it without you. Good to have you back. We'll be back tomorrow, maybe even a Saturday special. We'll see how the boys' liver's doing, and we'll be after it.
We're getting after it all week. We got to get to those 5 bold predictions at some point.
Maybe
tomorrow, maybe Tuesday after the waiver wire targets. But regardless, you can find us on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod, making it your first listen every single day. Once again, for your second listen, make sure you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. From Bo, Flip, and I, We wish you good luck with those weekly matchups, those big time bets we just mentioned, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.